Today we talk about the creative and philosophical challenges behind making music, why you should blast through obstacles, and all of the contradictions that we face as music producers. Please welcome the CEO of Soundfly, Ian Temple, to the Music Production Podcast. What's up, Ian? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. I've been enjoying Soundfly for a while now. So many great courses you guys have there. And the most recent thing that we were kind of just talking about and that really connected us again was the newsletter you're doing, this weekly newsletter that's seems to me like more philosophical stuff, process oriented. And that's a lot of the things I like to get involved with people on the podcast. So I was like, I got to get you on, and glad to have you finally.
Yeah, that's been a real focus of mine for kind of the past year. It's just like really thinking about my own creative process. You know, as a musician myself, I'm a pianist. That's my primary instrument. And for most of my creative life, I've just spent just playing piano for myself, right? Like I kind of took private lessons as a kid and then did some like jazz lessons in high school. I didn't go to music school or anything like that, but I just played a lot. Like I was one of those kids who played like 2-3 hours a day, you know, just like, so I'm pretty comfortable on the piano. And so for a large part of my adult life, the piano was just this thing that I would go to for like peace and for, you know, to stretch my mind a little bit. But recently, maybe the past couple of years, I've been trying to like actually expand my skills more, move into production a lot more, like even push my piano skills further, try and find the intersection between piano and production and stuff like that. And so I've started writing this like newsletter, just this kind of weekly almost reflection on the creative process, on what I'm learning from other people as I'm like on this journey, and sending that out through Soundfly to kind of our followers and subscribers. And it's got an amazing response. People always reply and they're like, you know, oh, this moved me, or I was thinking about this right now. I really needed to hear this week. And it's amazing how something as simple as just kind of like a thoughtful, short essay can kind of reach people sometimes, even in a way that sometimes like our courses, which are like mammoth and big and have lots of lessons and go really in depth, sometimes, you know, can't almost, you know, just like a little bite-sized piece of like a little reminder on your Friday morning that like, yes, you are an artist. Yes, you can think about your music in certain ways. Yes, maybe you need a like little framework reset, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I've enjoyed doing it, basically.
Yeah, it's funny because you've been playing piano a long time. I've been playing guitar a long time, doing music production a long time. And the instrument maybe I'm more proficient at, and I understand concepts, theory, how gear works. But the actual act of making music hasn't gotten easier ever along the way.
Yeah.
It's still hard, and it's so much of this more mental stuff that's the stuff like you just like, you're like constantly working on, and it's almost like an ever long plateau that you have to just keep pushing through. Whereas like some of the other stuff, you're like, oh, I get how an EQ works now. I get how to play, you know, arpeggios on the guitar or something like that.
Totally. Yeah. So you've got like almost like your skill tree. I like to think of it that you're kind of like, you're building these like specific skill sets, and that's kind of like a totally separate thing in some ways. You know, you're just adding to that skill tree. You're kind of like putting branches on or whatever it is, and then you're developing those branches out. And then you've got your like creative stuff, which is when you're taking what you've learned in your skill tree and actually trying to put it into practice for your work, for your creative output. And it is funny the way that creative output, like a skill tree to me is somewhat predictable, right? Like if you put in X amount of hours, if you do it in certain ways, like you are highly specific with your learning goals and you get feedback and you practice, if I like the B major scale on the piano is really hard because it's got all these black keys and weird finger positionings and stuff. So if you just practice the B major scale a lot over the course of a month, by the end of it, you'll be a lot better at playing that B major scale and like writing songs in the B major scale. That's very predictable. And it's funny, I think, with the creative output side of things, that it's just totally unpredictable. And, like some weeks you're on fire and everything you're doing is like gold. And some weeks it's just, you're banging your head against the wall. And some weeks you might think you're on fire, but the ideas you come up with, they're actually not that working that well. It's just, there's so much more kind of like magic and like alchemy, I guess, involved in that, like what the actual creative process is. The skill tree all goes into that. Everything you're like inputting will come out through that output, but it's still alchemy. And I think you do need to change your frame of mind often. You need different kind of mindsets you can tap into. You need, you need to be patient with yourself. I mean, that's a huge theme with me is like letting the way it is right now for you creatively, letting that be, like not hating that, not worrying about that. If you're stuck, not, getting angry at yourself, not pressurizing that situation, just like, acknowledging that you're stuck, being patient with yourself, forgiving yourself, loving yourself. And then like, that all sounds kind of corny, I know, but like that, I think I just see that so much with so many musicians, right? They're like, I'm not where I hate this idea. I don't like what I'm doing. I can't get over this line. And it's like, just like taking a moment and being like, it's part of a process. This is a process. And right now, this is where you are in the process. That's okay. Let's like move out of that by engaging the process and being patient and recognizing it's going to take time,
Yeah, the product is so hard to control and predict and make into what you want. But you can't ever get to that product without going through the process. And sometimes you don't get the product, but you'll never get it without the process. And you just have to like, and it's so hard, like you said, because you do get impatient. Like I'll sit down on my guitar and I'll be like, I play the same things all the time. Like I'm always playing these same chords or I wind up on this progression all the time, or I can't do the thing I want to do. I wish I was, all sorts of things. I wish I knew more theory. You can start really beating yourself up about it. And then I never get anything when I'm in those frames of mind. Like nothing will ever come out of that except, despair. But when I let go of that, and sort of be okay with sometimes, I do play these chords a lot. Then like interesting things start to happen along the way.
Do you?
But it
have
is real hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
There.
It is hard. I think I'm curious, do you have principles that like you feel like go into your creative process? Do you have like regular principles or maybe not even that explicitly,
I'm trying to more and more, I actually keep a list of, I just call them like philosophies to keep in mind. And it's probably like 300 on my list by now. and some of them are total contradictions. Like they go against each other, but sometimes I'll just look at them and pick like one or two to just, all right, okay, cool. Just, outsource the critic, like it's not my job to be the critic of whatever I make. Just make it. And that'll help a lot. Or a big one I've been into lately is working so fast that I can't be the critic, so it's like these timers or even like activities I do with, I got this music production club where we'll do like a meeting on Zoom for 2 hours. First hour we're making music, we get a prompt or something, we're all separate making music. And then the second hour we share what we came up with. And the heat of that hour, and like also since I'm hosting this meeting, I feel like I have to perform a little bit. Like Like if I make garbage, I'm going to be like a little embarrassed. But the fact that it's so pressurized actually relieves the pressure.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the excuse is always, well, I only had an hour, you know, and
totally.
you're kind of off the hook. So as much as like I would feel the pressure for that, knowing that, look, I got to do the best I can with what happens here, is freeing. So a lot of times it's just first idea I come up with. Okay, fine. I play these chords all the time, or I always use this beat, or I always at this tempo. But then it's like, now that I'm here, what can I do with it?
Right.
So I think that combines with another one that's really sticking in my head a lot lately is like most of your writing is reacting to what you've already written. And I heard that from an actual like text, novelist type writer. Um, and I think that's a good one too, because you need something to work from. You can't
Yeah. The blank
conceptualize
page
it.
is the hardest place to be sometimes.
Yeah, because it's infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
You can do anything on that blank page, that open session. It could be anything, any kind
Yeah.
of genre. It could be the greatest song ever made. Who knows? You're going to write that one song that like unites the world. Or it could just be like just a fun, silly but every possibility is kind of perfect in your imagination.
Right.
And every stroke you take, every sound you make is imperfect. And you have to just like get comfortable with that and react to it and try to do something interesting with what you have there.
Yeah.
Those are the
one
big
thing
ones for me now.
yeah, I
I
love
think.
that. Those are great. I think one thing that you mentioned at the beginning was how like some of your philosophies kind of contradict each other. And I think like with these little essays I've been writing in this newsletter, that's actually like one of the main focuses. Like the moment I find a contradiction, that's where I like want to write an essay, basically.
Hmm.
I love it when it's like, some two ideas that both feel right and both feel like they can't coexist, but obviously they can, right? So like your idea that what you were just saying, where like having that time pressure somehow depressurizes it, right? Like there's a contradiction there that's just so wonderful. And you're absolutely right. Like, you sometimes a little bit of pressure can be a really good thing. You need a deadline, you need, just something, but like pressuring yourself and criticizing yourself and saying that it's, nothing ever is good enough, that's gonna hold you back. So like you need both those things at the same time. So yeah, I love those like the truth of the matter is that like everyone's creative process is going to need different things in different moments. I don't think I've ever spoken with an artist who, when we make our courses with artists at Soundfly, we often get into the room with the artist and we say like, okay, describe your creative process. And like what I've learned from that is every single one of them is like, I mean, on what song, what album, like this song I wrote in a day. This song took me 8 years. This album I went to Finland, and this album I don't know, I was in a submarine. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's just all like each one. I think these principles can be really useful because you want principles that can apply in multiple situations, because the truth of the matter is that your creative process needs to constantly be refreshing, and different songs and different places in your life, different situations are going to require different approaches. One thing when we made the course with this pop artist, Kimbra, she made a big deal about momentum in writing and producing, and the importance of having momentum. And her kind of, this was a guiding concept for her, that like basically if she felt like she was stuck on something, she just knew she would get more and more stuck. Like the stuckness would like build on itself. So it was always about momentum. We were watching her create, and like the quickness with which she would just throw away ideas and bring in new ideas. Like she would come up with like a melody she loved. And I was like, yeah, that's such a great melody. And then 8 minutes later, she will have developed the song a bit more and she'll just throw away that melody because it's just no longer working anymore. And she'll just keep going. And this like anti-preciousness was so cool. And so that concept of momentum can apply then to multiple different kind of ways of being in parts of your life and whatever you're like working on right now. How can you generate momentum right now? Maybe you only have 5 minutes a day to work on your stuff. So, the focus needs to be, can I create a little bit of momentum in that 5 minutes? So maybe, you want to know what you're going to do before you start. I don't know. Or maybe you have longer time. Maybe, you're kind of more in like a writing retreat. You've got full days ahead of you. Well, then that momentum is going to be really important because when you have a full day ahead of you, it's going to be really easy to lose that momentum. So maybe you need to break up that day. Maybe you need to okay, I'm going to do like 3 sessions, session 1, session 2, session 3. And between each one, I'm going to do something totally different so that I can have momentum in the morning, have momentum in the afternoon, et cetera, et cetera. So I love kind of recognizing some principles and philosophies, as you said, that can kind of maybe apply across multiple situations because that the creative process you're going to need to draw on is going to be different as depending on your situation,
Did you really have someone that was in a submarine?
No, I did not. I don't know why the submarine came to mind. It was just an image in my head. Yeah,
right. That's cool.
That would be an interesting one. But I have had some interesting. I mean, like Kimber was talking about a song she wrote in an airport, and like the vocals in the airport she recorded like in the corner of an airport actually made it into the final track. And I've had
what would it be like on the phone, like kind of a voice memo?
Yeah, it's kind of like a voice memo.
So
yeah,
cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what some of the other, but there are lots of like interesting stories of the way artists develop ideas because oftentimes it just can be really different and unique. This guy Trues, who makes like synthwave music, it's really beautiful, cinematic. His first couple albums were all soundtracks to a made up space opera that he developed in his head. Basically. So he had this concept, and I can't remember it exactly, but there's like an android who is sent from Earth to like another planet or something, and like arrives there and gets involved in that planet's like civil war, and there's like a love story. And his albums, like, and you can listen to this music and never know that's the case, right? Like there's no words explaining that. I don't even think he has like liner notes explaining it. But that was what he was writing to. And that like dictated and helped direct his writing. And once he tells you this, you can hear it in the music because you're like, oh my God, that is the android like launching off into space. Oh, that's like this feeling of loneliness in space. That's like, I don't know. You just like, you can kind of start to see it. And then like at the end of, I think 3 albums, he retired that story. That story wasn't working for him anymore. And now he's using like completely different ways of writing and making that music. So I don't know. It's just, it kind of speaks to like the different kind of ways that people can approach this work that I always find kind of inspiring because I need different ones every time. I need like something new, otherwise I feel, as you were saying with like your guitar thing where you get like stuck in the same shapes. That resonates very strongly with me because like, I get stuck in the same shapes. And so I need something new, some new way of thinking that's gonna help push me forward.
I think a lot of people would say, I'm in the airport. I can't really do anything about this. I certainly can't record my vocals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, this is not my ISO booth studio with my U87 in front of me here. This is a voice memo, probably like iPhone recording in a loud, noisy airport. But momentum, like almost no matter where you are. like
Mm.
in any situation, whether it's physical space or the type of gear you have in front of you or the people you're working with at that time. To figure out a way to get that at all costs is that's where creativity happens, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because
Totally.
I have to figure out how to do this here now in this situation with these people. And that's when interesting things start happening. Whereas if I'm in my perfect situation, I've got like hours of time, I've got my guitar, everything's ready to go. Sometimes there's like no problem to solve.
Yeah.
There's nothing, no obstacle, no mountain to climb.
Right. I talk a lot about blasting obstacles out of your way. And what I mean by that is like the obstacles that are telling you you can't do it right now. You can't generate momentum right now. And for some people, that obstacle and sometimes that obstacle is real. If you do not know how to play guitar and you are trying to write a guitar song, that obstacle is real. The first thing you need to do before you can write that guitar song is you need to learn guitar, right? Like that's a very obvious thing, but but that's like a very real obstacle. I mean, for me this year, I'm trying to record a lot more music personally, and I'm a pianist. And it felt like the reason I haven't done it for the past couple of years was because I didn't have a piano sound I liked. I have some great virtual instrument pianos, but they're a little bit, I mean, they're beautiful, especially for like commercial work that I've done occasionally, but like they're a little bit soulless and not kind of the sound I want. So this obstacle of not being able to get a piano sound that I was really excited by was just in my way. So I took 3 months. I have an upright here in my house that is my childhood upright. And I just spent 3 months figuring out how to get a sound from it that would get me excited. And I didn't worry about any creative output for those 3 months. I just like worried about like, I'm going to solve this obstacle so that this is no longer an obstacle. That is one of the reasons I keep telling myself I can't do what I'm trying to do, and I solved it. And now I'm totally like, I'm recording every week and it feels so good. And so I think that obstacle you mentioned, like, well, I can't work on it right now. I'm in an airport or whatever it is. Like, if there are real obstacles, I think it can be worth spending time and like even putting your creative output aside to just like sort those out. But then oftentimes those obstacles are just in your head too, right? Like there's that mindset obstacle. Like I think the airport one is much more of a mindset obstacle. It's like, actually, you could just take out a voice memo and almost, I mean, so many artists that have talked about this stuff publicly talk about how songs of theirs have stuff recorded on an iPhone or a phone in it. Like I think Charlie Puth talked about that. I think, obviously I already mentioned Kibra did that. We made a course with this incredible musician named Ryan Lott, who is part of the band Sunlux and has scored a number of films. And he talked about always using his iPhone mic when he needs a mic, in a pinch. So like the mic's there. These are things people do. It's often just a mindset thing. You're like, oh no, I couldn't do that. Or like professionals wouldn't do that. I'm going to be unprofessional if I do that. I need to, and that's kind of a more interesting obstacle in some ways because it's harder to get past. You have to change your way of thinking. Sometimes you just need to look at it from another light. You need maybe a confidence boost occasionally, those mindset obstacles are tough. But really, I think that's kind of one of the most interesting parts about working with artists and working with aspiring musicians, and like, how can you help each other develop your own mindset to be really productive and supportive of what you're trying to do,
I find that a lot with community or with friends or playing in my band, that sometimes it's what they say, their attitude about something or their approach, or little things that you can kind of like recognize that, oh, I probably wouldn't do it that way, or I wouldn't have thought of that. And then, but yeah, let's see what that does. Because you do get, like you said, these mindset obstacles. They become like concrete and solid when you
Mhm.
don't have anyone else to see it. And sometimes you don't even see the obstacle because you just accept it as this permanent structure. And then
Totally.
someone else can
Yeah.
come along and say, like, well, what if you just do that? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, if we like, because maybe Kimbra with this iPhone recording is in the studio saying, like, I got to re record this, but it's not working out. And because it's an iPhone recording in an airport, it's unacceptable,
Right. Totally.
professionally, it's wrong in every way. But for someone, you might need someone to just say, like, why don't you just use that?
Yeah, totally.
And now
100%.
you've got like a new path with its own problems and issues, but you're embracing them now instead of
Yeah.
fighting with them.
You can create some momentum, back to that
Yeah.
momentum. Yeah, I mean, this kind of happened to me the other day actually, because I was I'm part of this Discord community called Opia, and it was founded by this neoclassical ambient electronic musician called Olafur Arnolds. Have you heard of Olafur Arnolds? He's done a bunch of film scores, and he just makes beautiful music. And this community kind of built, and label kind of built up around him, and now there's a Discord community, and I'm very active there. And it's really fun. As you said, it's just like that having community is so important because it can help you like get out of some habits that you might not even recognize in yourself. So the other day Olaf Arnold is part of a duo called Chiasmos. They're an electronic duo. And I was just like, oh man, I wish I could make beats the way they make beats. And so I go into this community. I'm like, yo, does anyone have any tips? How do you make beats like Chiasmos makes beats? And they're like, I don't know, but have you tried like Googling it, and going on like YouTube? And I'm like, and it turns out the other Chiasmos guy, not Oliver, has a whole YouTube channel where he teaches people how to make beats like Chiasmos. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's so obvious. Like, come on. But sometimes you just need someone
message board comment.
Yeah, exactly. Such a typical message board comment.
But sometimes you need to hear it almost. Yeah. Like it's out there.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well where like, have you ever said something and the moment you said it, you realize that it's wrong? Right? You just haven't challenged your thinking. Yeah. It's been this like thing that's stuck in your brain. I love, by the way, I love how flawed we humans are in our thinking sometimes, right? Like all of us gets, you hear about terms like confirmation bias and like these different like heuristics that various like psychology studies have discovered where like humans trick ourselves all the time. We're tribal. If a belief aligns with who we think our tribe is, then we are more likely to believe that, or a set of facts. We're more likely to believe those facts. I mean, obviously this comes into play in politics all the time, but it's beyond politics. I kind of love this stuff. I love thinking about the ways that our brains kind of get stuck in loops, or like, I don't want to say work against us because that's not really it. Our brains are us. They're part of us. They're not working against us. But like, certainly get stuck in weird places, and like sometimes you'll just say something and it's been this thing that's been going on in your head, and the moment you say it and you realize that someone might challenge you on it, you're like, wait a second, that's not correct at all. Why did I say that? And that's as you said, that's the value of community. That's the value of having others, of talking about your creative process. For me, that's the value of like, one of the reasons I love doing these like little essays every week to the Soundfly newsletter is just like, it forces me to be explicit with what I'm thinking of. And like, if I write something down and I think about how the audience might receive that, I'm like, wait, do I actually believe that? Is that actually right? Or have I just been telling myself this like weird story this whole time,
That's a great way to explore your thoughts. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Me for writing, like putting things into terms and phrases, and then to look at them, and because now I'm in like an editing mindset,
Right.
so I'm questioning what I wrote, whereas the thoughts, I don't even think to question them sometimes. And same thing with doing this podcast, whether I'm having a conversation with somebody or I'm just doing like one of the solo episodes, it really makes you put your ideas through the ringer when you start
Yeah.
speaking them. I guess that's why, like talk therapy is so effective for so many people, because you
Totally.
kind of just need to hear what you're saying a little bit. And our thoughts are these kind of like, I think I think in language a lot anyway, but it's like not necessarily well structured language. It's kind
Mhm.
of these like clouds of ideas. And when you start labeling them or putting them into sentences and structuring them, sometimes you're looking at them, you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
I don't know about that anymore. Or
Totally. That
I
one's really
gotta,
true, or that one's not true,
yeah.
or that one. Yeah. I mean, as an English teacher, you must think about words in this way all the time and probably resonate. But
Oh, I love what labels actually a lot,
mm,
where I can like just take a concept and put it into like 3 or 4 words or a
right,
phrase or something, just so like it's like a symbol, I guess.
right,
That's
right,
what
right.
words are really, right? They're like symbols, they represent things. So when you can just take these things that are all cloudy and identify it as like, oh,
Totally.
that's this thing. And then it comes into shape a little better, you know. But we are like these contradiction machines, and the funny thing about all these like biases you're talking about, like these cognitive things we have, is even when you know them, you're still just as
Yeah,
susceptible to them as anyone else.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you think you know about it, so I'm not going to fall for that, but you do all the time, and that's the reason why it's a flaw. It's a bias. It's a problem we have.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's this I think I think he's a cognitive psychologist. Daniel Kahneman, he died recently this year. Have you ever heard that name before, Daniel Kahneman?
Yes.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. I want to say like
Hmm.
15 years ago, and it was really, really, it was a big hit. It kind of like really introduced a lot of people to this idea of like our cognitive biases and stuff. It might even be more than it might be like 20 years ago or more. Um, and and he says in it like, I'm just showing you the concepts, but like you might assume that because I've been researching this and doing this that I'm like not immune, I'm immune to these concepts. No, they still affect me just as much as everyone else. So I'm just telling you about it. Basically, I can't tell you how to
Mm.
solve it. I think like, that's where I feel like a theme of this conversation is changing things up, right? It, you need to embrace a certain fluidity and flexibility in your creative process as an artist. And I think that's what the best artists do so well, actually, is like they know what to hold constant. This is who I am. This is what I make. This is my voice. These are some principles I adhere to. And they know what to be always flexible with. You know, this is how the way I make music is going to be totally different. The people I'm collaborating with is going to be totally different. You know, I need new inputs to keep myself moving forward. And I think that like flexibility is so important, and maybe people don't realize it enough. Like just because you've figured out some way to work that's been working for you for the past couple months, like doesn't mean that's going to work for you forever, actually.
Mm.
Finding ways to inject newness, to inject a new lens on things. I like thinking about our thought patterns in terms of stories you're telling yourself. And I like saying, like, okay, what are the stories you're telling yourself right now? And one of the reasons I like that is because you need to constantly be injecting new stories into your thinking, right? You need to be telling new stories. So this month, I'm telling myself the story of ABC. And then next month, I'm telling myself this different story. Or like then stories creep in, and you might like suddenly, I'm telling myself a story that like I'm not a person who can create a lot during the week or something like that. Like that just might be a story that I don't even realize I'm telling myself, but I am telling myself. And so then you need to like disrupt that story and replace it with something new. Oh, actually, I'm a person who has a busy schedule, but can find occasional time within. I don't know, to find a way to like reframe that story in a different light. So yeah, just that importance of being flexible with your thinking, knowing what to hold constant and knowing where to just be fluid and allow new inputs to constantly be coming in and disrupting and dislodging things that might be starting to get stale, you know?
The idea of the stories is so important,
Mm,
because our whole life, right? Everything is filtered through our mind first. Like there's no real one thing going on in this world, right? It's all our perspectives and our interpretations of everything.
exactly.
And the way you interpret it you have some control over that.
Mm,
If you can recognize it. That's the hard part.
totally. Yeah.
I get this a lot as a teacher, where especially if I'm at a kind of transition point where I am finishing something up with the class and it's time to start thinking about something new. So I'll be like in bed usually at night, kind of thinking about the next morning, not sure what I'm going to do. And then these stories start creeping into my head, like, I wish I was more literary, and then I think like, this person in my department they're so well read, and like, I don't know any of that stuff about that particular time period of and I start telling myself these stories of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not cut out for this. When are they going to find out that I'm just a fraud? I'm just like some idiot faking it all along. And I'm like, I think of it as like watching a DVD or something. I'm like watching the movie. If I'm a terrible fake phony and everyone's about to discover my failures and realize who I really am. And
we all have that.
I'm on the brink of that moment right now. It's going to happen any day. Parents going to call, whatever, and I'll be outed. And I think to myself sometimes like, all right, I need to stop like watching that DVD.
Yeah.
It's like, I got to take that out and put on this other one called like, I've been here before. I've been doing this for many years. I have training and experience. I think I know what's right. I trust myself enough, like all these like kind of reaffirming things. And I'm going to watch that movie instead because it's going to serve me better. And I think what you said about some of the other things too is like, you can almost decide to watch that movie that will serve you. So like, I'm the kind of person that finds ways around creative problems or like you said, like I'm the kind of person that I have a day job and I work a lot, but I find little gaps where I can do music and those actually serve me. It's a story I tell myself too.
Right.
And I don't know if it's to like comfort me or whatever, but I like to say like when I'm working at school, I'm sometimes more productive because I have the time crunch and I got to do it now.
Yep.
And that belief could easily be transformed into like, if I had more time and if I didn't have to go to this job, I could do more. And then next thing you know, I hate my job. I resent it. And I'm not making music because I have to fulfill this story in my head. But just twisting it to kind of serve me.
That's right.
Kind of
it's
mentally
funny
trick yourself.
Thinking about staying on like the English teacher like thing, it's almost when you think of your thought patterns as stories, you can almost turn it into a writing exercise, right? Like, so there might, if you say like, I'm not a person who is able to make music during the week. Let's just use that again because I don't know. Like there might be some part of that story that is based on truth, right? You are very busy, you've got kids, you've got a crowded schedule. But like fundamentally that story the way it's existing in your head is not serving you, as you pointed out. So just turn it into a writing exercise, like rewrite that sentence in a couple different ways, I'm a person who's busy during the week, but I can, but I'm also a person who solves problems. So I will find time, or like I'm a person who's busy during the week, but I have a vacation coming up and I would like to use that for creative work, or you know what I mean? Or like, there's just, you can literally like rewrite the same sentence, which might have a kernel of truth in it, but that sentence is, that story, that way you're thinking about it is just like disempowering. And you can just rewrite that story in a way that is going to help you find a way forward and kickstart your momentum again. So it's all about like, telling those stories that are going to help you get to that place of momentum. I mean, it's, writing exercise.
Yeah, because you're going to act based on what you believe. And if I believe I don't have enough time during the week, I'm not going to even try.
Right, exactly.
I can't. There's not enough time. I can't do it. And then, I don't even get past that. But if I believe that I can get something done today, I'm much more likely to make an attempt. It's a tricky, you have to see it though. You have to notice it. And I mean, I gotta be honest, like the way that I've been able to see it most is like through meditation, like actually trying to meditate and just sit with my thoughts and watch them and notice like, hey, it's just a thought. It's just something I'm thinking. And you notice it. I notice it, to go back to teaching again, with students when they're having like issues with each other and they think like, they did that to me. That kid, he did this, he bumped into me because of this and like yelled at me and all these things that happen. And it's like, you probably not, they're probably doing their own thing and you just got caught in the crossfire or whatever it was. But when you latch on to that, like that's all you can see. And you're so caught up in it. But sometimes if you can step away and just look at it and question it and make it work for you instead,
Yeah, there's that example reminds me of what would be a foundational text for me, for my like principles. Do you know the David Foster Wallace, I think it was a speech actually, called "This Is Water." It's been published now and stuff. David Foster Wallace.
I don't think so.
The amazing author, wrote Infinite Jest, kind of big landmark book of modern literature. And he gave this, I think it was a high school graduation speech or something, which to me has just always stuck with me. It's so moving. And it's all about these stories we tell ourselves. Actually, you're just like the way you were talking about just reminded me of it. Made me. I highly recommend this essay to everyone. It's called "This Is Water," David Foster Wallace, and it starts with two fish swimming through water, and an old fish two young fish, and an old fish passes them by, and the old fish says, "Hey, how's the water?" And the two fish sneer at him and swim on, and then like turn to each other and they're like, "What's water?" And like the idea then is developed throughout the essay that like, we have the choice to some extent to interpret the world around us. And, you can be in the line in the grocery store and you can be pissed off because you're in the line at the grocery store and it's going too slowly and you want to go home and you are just like totally drained and the person in front of you is taking too long and stuff like that. Or you can, realize that the person in front of you has a disability and it's much harder for them than it is for you. And the reason they're going slowly is because they're having a hard time with it. And, you can reflect on how much harder their experience is is than yours, and kind of take that appreciation. Or you can find find kind of wonder in the logistical magic that has gotten all that stuff in the grocery store to that place, and the fact that you can buy anything you want at the, and you have this privilege of being in the grocery store and standing in line and stuff like that. And like his whole point in the speech is that like figuring out what stories how to live in the world while telling yourself productive stories, while taking the inputs that are coming at you, taking the parts of life that are coming at you, and interpreting them in a way that doesn't drive you crazy, that doesn't drive you to kind of despair, is the key to life, is actually the most important thing you can learn in life. It's the most important skill you can develop in life. Basically, like realizing that you are in water, right? Like recognizing that you are in water, and figuring out how to keep that top of mind. It's a beautiful essay. I mean, I'm kind of not doing it justice here.
I have to check that out. Sounds great.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, honestly, like I assign it to your students. It's beautiful by a stunning author. I'm an advocate, and I think that drives a lot of the stuff that I write in my newsletter. Actually, kind of bringing it full circle, just because I think if there's like a theme to what I'm trying to write, it's trying to help people, offer people new stories that they can tell themselves, new productive stories that they can tell themselves, to help enjoy the creative process more, to help and making music more, to help make more progress with their creative process, to help reach their goals and dreams, whatever they may be, to help appreciate the process even if they don't meet those goals and dreams, to just kind of find magic in this beautiful act of music making that we're all lucky enough to do, and to kind of remember that magic. And while you're in it and you're feeling frustrated and the DAW is not working the way it's meant to, and you can't get your compression settings right, and the hook is just not hitting the way you need it to, and all these things that just can frustrate you on a day-to-day basis, like taking a moment and recognizing that you're in water, and appreciating that water, and finding new approaches and frameworks to remember the magic in the music making.
I like the idea of magic in there. I like the idea of craft too. So here's a contradiction, right? Like I like the idea that I can, figure it out step by step and learn techniques that I can apply. But the magic is just as fun too, where sometimes things just click and sometimes things just happen. And I'm always kind of hunting it in a way. And I'm using my techniques and steps and process really to find that, like to uncover like that secret spot, like I have a map of the woods, but I'm trying to find that like hidden area that if I go down the paths, maybe it'll appear. But there is something that happens. That's why it's so cool, right? Like, because music is so mathematical and scientific on a lot of levels, but then it's also artistic and hard to put your finger on, and it's magic also.
Yeah, I mean, there's this constant breathing, right? Like in and out, where you, like you can use a note. A note is very mathematical, stuff like that. But then you can also like zoom in on a note, a single note, and like a note on the piano, let's say, and you can like listen. I don't know. As a kid, I used to lie underneath I had this great piano teacher who would have me lie underneath the piano while he played, and he would start by just playing like a single note, and you'd get these overtones, right? Like this just like array of sound. And like as part of a piece, it's functional. It's like a single note like brings something to the melody. It helps create whatever harmony. It's part of the craft. And then you zoom in and you just like listen to that one note, and this and that can balloon into this world on its own, right? Like all these different tones, all these different like um feelings, and I don't know, just like there's so much to that. Oh, something's happening outside the window. Apologize for the noise.
That's okay. We'll take care of it.
Yeah.
There's some magical tools now that can
Yeah,
get
there
rid
you
of some
go.
of
The
that stuff.
magic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think
Right.
it's this. I love thinking of it almost as like breathing. You
Mm.
have this like you in all parts of the craft. Like you know, you breathe out and you make something, and you are very practical and you're very functional, and you breathe in and you focus on something and you allow for the magic to be with you, and then you breathe out and you get back to kind of doing something by the book. You do a verse and a chorus, and then you breathe in and you tweak that chorus melody so it's just like exactly, or you just like sit with that chorus melody, you let it like soak over you, and then you breathe out, and you know what I mean, and like and finding different ways to have this like breathe in and out mentality in your creative process, I found can be really valuable.
Hmm. Yeah, and it makes sense too on a lot of levels because you have to listen, but you also have to create and
Yeah,
produce the sound, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah,
you're interacting with the input output of everything constantly
totally.
in real time.
Yeah,
And what
yeah,
you said about like the way the single note starts like kind of unfolding and you're hearing the overtones and stuff. It's a fun thing that happens with music, especially, when you're creating productions that you can add elements and stack things together and make these rich compositions, but it starts serving like a bigger purpose as like one thing rather than these individual elements. But when you break things down and you just have a couple elements, now you can really appreciate the details of each
yeah,
element. Those details get lost, but when if you make something bigger, more complex, the details get lost. But if you take them away, now you can hear like the breath in the voice on an acoustic song, right? With just a
yeah,
piano and a voice. Whereas you don't hear that in the orchestra or with the whole band or something. Like there's a give and take there to be mindful of how
yeah.
things work together, and there's sacrifice involved, I guess, as well,
Yeah,
which is
that is the beauty of music production specifically. I feel like is actually like that as a producer, as a mix engineer or something, you get to like zoom in and you get to really like and zoom out, right? You really are doing that like breathing thing that I was talking about like very explicitly. You like focus on the lead vocal, and you hear every like lip smack and every breath and whatever it is, and you get to like appreciate those, and you get to mold that lead vocal to exactly what you want it to be, and then you put it back in with the whole track, and then you
mm,
maybe adjust it again a little bit to but or whatever it is, but you're doing this like in and out, and you yeah, I mean, I find, I don't know about you, but as a producer I often like get stuck so deep in, right? Like one sound, I'll just spend hours and I'm just like trying to get that sound exactly the way I want it. And then I need to like zoom out and
mm.
zoom in, zoom out. But I think that's also our privilege as music producers, right? Is that we get to see those details and we get to interact with those details and like sweat them, even in a way that like listeners might not hear, but they'll notice in the whole and the way the whole works together,
Yeah, it's kind of the blessing and the curse
Yeah,
because
the blessing and the curse, exactly.
you never get to hear your song for the first time. So you don't know how it really impacts people as a whole. When it comes out as that final product, you don't get to experience that because you know all the little tiny things and all the little sketches and lines and creases of everything. But you get to also appreciate that. And I think part of it is deciding which ones to shine the light on and which ones to
Right.
come through.
Yeah.
But it can be really tricky to get that kind of managed, which is again why like collaborators, community can be so helpful.
Yep.
And especially even people that aren't musicians or music producers, because sometimes they'll hear your song and just say like, I can't understand the words. and you're like, oh man, me and my producer friends loved that really crazy effect we had on the vocal. We were all impressed by how I ran it through all this outboard gear, and but the final product misses the mark because we're too caught up in the details. But I don't know what you're saying.
That reminds me of like one of the first studio albums I made with one of my bands, and it was like, it was like a kind of a bit of an orchestral rock band. We had like guitar, drums, keys, bass, but then like violin and cello and viola.
Cool.
And it was a cool project. We made like post rock music, and but I remember like on this album that we made in the studio together, I was with the producers, and we decided to put like sidechain on the drums in a certain part. And we were so psyched on it, right? We thought it sounded so cool. This is live drums, and they just like ducked in and out. And then like we played it to someone, and because the rest of the album was just like, it was very like clean instruments, not much like, studio magic at all. The compression just like did not work in that moment. They're like, where is this coming? Why is this suddenly an electron? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And we're just like, oh, we got too excited by what we could do, and forgot to kind of like listen to the whole thing together. That's a funny moment, but yeah.
Yeah, it happens constantly when you're working on something, especially when you're doing all the elements and you're.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, like the cliche of like the band where like the guitar player keeps turning up their thing, and so the other guitar player, everyone's turning up because they're the most important thing in the band, right? Like, that tambourine I played has to be the loudest thing, But when you're producing your own songs, like you're that person for every single sound.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, well, I've made this cool sound that the spaceship noise has to be like the dominant feature. But sometimes you have to know when to sacrifice things. And I guess like what you're saying, what Kimber did well was knowing when to throw stuff away.
Yeah.
Kind of not being afraid and not being precious about things is definitely important. You can't just hold on to things because you spent a lot of time on them. Sometimes that's exactly why it doesn't work. You spend too much time on it and overcook the cake,
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So the music I'm making at the moment is mostly with a trio called Sontag Shogun. And it's kind of experimental trio. We have piano, electronics, a lot of like analog stuff, old oscillators and tape loops and field recordings and stuff like that. It's really fun. But the way we've been recording a little bit recently is like, I'll record like a piano idea, and then my other two kind of bandmates will like send responses to that. They'll add vocals, sometimes affected, sometimes clean. They'll add like, different kind of drones on these various synths, kind of analog synths. They'll add field recordings, sounds, textures, stuff like that. And so it's really interesting for me because, once I'm the producer, but like I don't have control over the inputs I'm getting. So I'm just getting this flood of sound. And oftentimes when I'll get it from both of them at the same time, and it's just like, it doesn't make any sense, it's just like, and then it's really interesting, like going through and like carving out like of these three voices, trying to turn them into a cohesive voice. And I've been really enjoying this process of taking things out and putting things in the spotlight, finding different ways to like meld the sounds together and stuff like that. It's been, so once again, this is the theme of the conversation. Those other voices get me out of my head. They get me out of like, they surprise me. They take the song to a new direction. I just love, finding ways to get out of your own head, right? Like, and my bandmates definitely do that for me in this project. So I'm finding it really, really rewarding as a producer right now.
I'm enjoying it a lot too. Playing in a 3-piece garage rock type of thing.
Nice. Yeah.
Just the collaborative nature of it's so fun, and
it's so much fun. Yeah, I think music is meant to be collaborative. I mean, it's beautiful doing it on your own, but like it
it's cool, like, and weird in a lot of ways that suddenly this time and age, like we probably a lot of us are more often working alone
Yeah,
and making
totally.
music alone. Whereas for the entire history of humanity, you needed to have other people. You need someone
Yeah.
else to like bang on that drum while you banged on this drum around the fire. You couldn't do that on your own. But going now, and I've kind of had that experience now. I've played with bands and done things where I wished I could have a little more control over everyone. And then I've gotten to do it all by myself where I have complete control. And now I'm in a point where I've got both.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I
That's
get
great.
together with the band, it's just so nice to only kind of work together. So I'm not bringing in song ideas. We're not writing things outside and telling you have to play this on the drums and I have to play this on this. It's so nice to just see what happens
Yeah.
and react
And
just
react.
react.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Beautiful way to do it.
It's a different way of working, and I think both ways help the other.
Yeah.
Having that like reaction thing and hearing what other people do make me try new things on my stuff and vice versa. You've mentioned the obstacle. I wanted to just kind of come back to this because I think it's another contradiction, which is another one of our themes today,
Yeah.
like going after the obstacle. And you mentioned like the piano. And I get what you mean exactly. I have an upright piano. It's like over 100 years old, and I sampled it, made instruments out of it. Like anyone can get it now. And it has all these quirks and character to it. But it does take a long time to do that.
Yep.
And sometimes when you're conquering these obstacles, you are also avoiding the act. So
That's
it's
right.
great to do these things. But one of my favorite ways to do that is like rearrange the studio, or
Yeah.
suddenly like when I have time to make music, all the chores get done, or I decide like I'm only going to get stuff out of the way so my path is perfectly clear. And that's important. It's important to do that stuff, but it's also important to realize when you're avoiding the work too.
100%. Yeah, that's real. And it's funny with the piano thing. I can tell you very specifically, we've been playing this cover of Tom York's Dawn Chorus live, my trio, Sontag Shogun. And it's great. It's really fun to play live, and we kind of take it to like a new place. And it was just really a fun song. So we're like, maybe we should try recording it. We've never done a cover before. Just record it. And I was like, we can't, because I can't record the piano yet. I just can't do it. And my bandmates were like, you can just kind of, come on, just use a digital instrument, just use a VST, a sample pack. And eventually they broke me down and convinced me, and I did. And I think I used The Giant by Native Instruments, that sample.
I've seen it. Yeah, I haven't used it.
It's interesting. It's a little quirky. It's got that kind of a little soft touch. It's nice for kind of more almost ambient music. But I did. I recorded. I just gave in and I recorded it. And I kind of embraced the kind of studio side of it and added some effects on it, made it sound a little. So we put that out at the end of last year, and it's done really well for us. It's been like, I don't know. It's growing in listeners like every day, and I don't even know how that's done. So yeah, I had to just like, it's better sometimes to just like go and like stop making. But at the same time, I knew that I wouldn't be happy doing a whole album. Like I want a very piano centric album with some compositions I've written. And if the piano is the main character of this album and the piano is like outsourced to someone else, it's like it made on a sample pack, and I can like correct the notes that in my performance that I don't like. It's not gonna be what I need it to be to get excited about it and to feel motivated by it. So that's why I did both, really. And to your point, it's like those obstacles really can hold you back, and lots of time they're not really obstacles. There was nothing wrong with releasing a track with VST piano, and at the same time, I knew I needed to do this, so I spent that 3 months figuring out how to mic my piano in a way that I'd be happy with. And I'm really excited about the sound I have, even as much as I love the Dawn Chorus version we released. So yeah, different things for different moments, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I guess you got to know when the obstacle's killing the momentum, right?
Right.
And your band members are saying like, "Come on, let's not let this get in the way. Let's not let this be the thing that prevents us from moving forward." That's a helpful thing of collaborators and communities. Like, all right, yeah, okay, let's not let this be the thing.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is realizing that like the thing that you do right now doesn't have to define you for forever, So like if I'm releasing a track right now and I'm using a piano sound, a sample that, is maybe not everything I want it to be, that's okay. It's not going to be that forever. It doesn't have to be that forever. Next one can be something different, And I think that's the first thing we've talked about on this call was embracing the process and knowing that like, there is a process behind everything, and where you are in that process is going to change, and there are going to be some things you like and some things you aren't like, and just recognizing and accepting the way things are right now and accepting the part of the process. So yeah, you put something out that's maybe not everything you hope. Here's another foundational text actually we're coming back to. It's Ira Glass little riff. I think Ira Glass did this. He just riffed at some Q&A event, and some really creative person made an amazing video on this animating this Ira Glass riff, and it's called The Gap. You can find it on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. And Ira Glass basically talks about when you start any artistic pursuit, you get into it. You want to be an artist because you got great taste, right? You can recognize great art. You can recognize great music. That's why you want to do it, is because you love that stuff. But when you're starting out, your skills don't match your taste. So you're just not going to be able to produce stuff that is as good as you want it to be, and you're going to recognize that because you still have good taste. And that's like this incredibly frustrating moment. And I think, what I would add to Ira Glass's definition of the gap is that gap always exists to some degree. It just might like, okay, I've finally figured out how to do the piano I want, but now there are things in production that I still can't do the way I want them to. But it's a process. So I'm just going to like, the music I'm making right now is going to be a snapshot of where I am right now, which is like, I have a piano sound I like, and my production's not quite everything I want it to be, but it's good enough. Let's put this out, and then this process will move forward. And I love in this video, like Ira Glass just talks it's so heartfelt the way he speaks. He like reaches out. It feels like he's reaching out to you. And he says, just with all my heart, just don't give up. Just keep making. The only way to conquer that gap is to just create a lot. Just create. Make art every single day or every single week, whatever your schedule allows. Just make art. And that's how you get past that gap. It's another beautiful piece. So yeah, highly recommend.
I think I've read that or heard that or seen it or something somewhere.
Yeah, the best way to consume it is this video, because the guy, whoever made this video is just brilliantly creative. It's got like different words on the speech, just animated in different like interesting ways, like like SpaghettiOs in a bowl, like floating around and like stuff like that. So it's beautifully done.
I'll find it, put in our notes, our links for this show.
Yeah. Put that and This Is Water in the next version.
And I like that idea of, he's like really passionate, like you said, of reaching out, like saying, keep going.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a story too, that one of these like movies you watch in your head. And it has to do with like kind of jealousy of other artists, like when other people finish stuff or they get success or they're moving forward, and we can resent that. We can feel jealous. We can say, oh, if I had that or what they have or this
Right.
or
Totally.
they were able to do it because of this or that. That's not fair. Whatever you want to, however we do this. I've really embraced this idea now of whenever anybody finishes anything, it's like a celebration for me. In that
I love
you
that.
just gave me more evidence that this is not impossible. Because there are times when I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's impossible. Like, I can't do it anymore. I've lost it. And then someone comes along and makes something and it's like, yeah, like you can do it.
You did.
It's possible.
So I can do it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And that idea of the gap is important. And it makes me think of that paradox. I don't remember what it's called, but it's the paradox of like how if in order for me to get to point A to point B, I first have to travel halfway. Now I'm halfway there. And then to get from halfway, I have to go another halfway. So the idea is like you will never get there because you will always
go halfway.
Half gets smaller. And that's kind of like the creative process is you are like getting closer and closer, but you're only getting halfway there. And each time it's an approximation. It's almost there. And to think of your work as like an artifact or like a diary entry of you at the time is really helpful.
Yeah.
And that
exactly.
This is me now.
Snapshot of the moment.
It's not the full realized vision I have here, but I'm getting there. And next time we'll get a little closer, maybe a little bit. But know that you're kind of never getting there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%.
And that's kind of what's cool about it too.
Yeah. Yep. That brings us back to the very first thing I think we said, which is like acceptance, just like, you're this is where you are right now, and being patient with yourself and loving yourself and forgiving yourself if you're not exactly where you need to be right now, because you will get there. It's a process.
Yeah, you gotta accept it and also have the drive to
keep pushing forward. Yeah, exactly.
And get better.
And you accept this moment and you work toward making next moment even better. Yeah. Exactly.
And maybe that's why it's so hard, is because it is just contradiction after contradiction.
That's right. 100%.
You just constantly banging your head against ideas. It worked the last time. Why doesn't it work this time?
Exactly. Yep. So
that's the fun part, though.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what you're doing in the newsletter, which is it's really cool to get kind of this real-time newsletter from you right now.
There you go.
and hear this stuff, because it's all important stuff we need to hear. And like we said earlier too, it's not like you conquer it ever. It's like you do develop skills and you keep them with you to a degree. Of course, you gotta practice still, but you kind of acquire skills. But like this stuff is always like some kind of weird chess match that you have to constantly be on the lookout for a new move and new strategies. So it's been fun, man, talking to you about this, and I'm excited for the next one. Where can people go to sign up for the newsletter?
Yeah, come to soundfly.com. If you create an account, you'll be added to the newsletter. If you don't want to create an account, I think there's like an email sign up somewhere on there, or on the blog Flypaper. So yeah, come sign up for the newsletter. Reply to the newsletter. People don't often realize. I think you don't think about that, but like I love the replies I get, and I reply to most people, sometimes start conversations with people around it. So I love those conversations. So yeah, come join and check it out.
Yeah, I think that's what I did about being on the podcast.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff there too. I did watch the Comtrue's course. I love his music, and it was a lot of fun to hear that process of like creating the movie, but also just to see them work. And like, he's got a process, but you can see he's also open to new things as well. Where's this going to go? And for me, that is one of the most fun type of things to see, is how people wrestle with their ideas and figure it out. And that's a good example of that. I'll have to check out the Kimber one too, because that sounds really cool.
Yep. Yeah.
So awesome. So soundfly.com. I'll put all this in the show notes. Ian, it's been awesome, man. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, someone you think that would enjoy the show. I'd also love it if you could leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support my work, you can go to brianfunk.com. I've got tons of Ableton Live packs, tutorials, samples. You can check out my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, which gives you 365 short music-making activities to help you get started, stay inspired, and finish more music. And there's also the Music Production Club, where you get my latest releases as soon as they're finished. It gives you access to a community of like-minded people who are making music and sharing ideas. You can share your music, find new collaborators, and participate in our live meetings where we set up some kind of musical challenge and then make music together and share our results at the end. That's the Music Production Club. It's a lot of fun, and you can find that and everything that I do at brianfunk.com. Thanks again for listening to the show, and have a great day.